is sending that to me, I will go ahead and bring us to order. So Secretary Folwell, that's my daughter's Himalayan tea bell. So that's the closest we come to a Rotary bell up here in the North Carolina mountains. Welcome everyone to our meeting of June 22. We're so glad that so many of you are able to join us today. We have one very special guest today. Treasurer Dale Falwell is with us today to tell us about the state of the state's economy and budget and pension fund and the way forward. So we're very much looking forward to this meeting, very special meeting today. So as everyone knows, you're muted unless the ringmaster or Linda will recognize you for a question or a comment. So raise your hand or send a message if you wish to be heard, and the ringmaster will unmute you and you can pose your question or make your comment. With that, I'm going to call upon Charles Edwards, our administrator, to welcome special guests and also to give us the invocation and the pledge.
Thank you, President Jim. When the world seems to have lost its mind, we must always hold true to that which we bind. As Rotarians, our obligations never end to help those whose lives we seek to mend. It is not our obligation to finish the task, but neither is it our privilege to stop trying to complete it. You cannot know if you have succeeded, but you can know if you tried your best. To even ask yourself that question proves that you have indeed tried your best. Remember, life does not give us a scorecard for what really matters. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice
for all. And now I'm going to turn it over to Linda. Linda, you've got a list of our guests, I hope.
Yes, well, our main guest is Secretary Falwell, and we had his assistant, Anna, but I've not seen any other guests. If there are any other guests, please let me know, because I'm not seeing anybody else out of the ordinary. So if anybody else has a guest, please unmute yourself and let us know.
Okay, Jim, I think it's back to you.
All right. Well, as everyone knows, we are continuing our work of service even during this time of pandemic. We're supporting charities. We have given $1,000 each to our four principal charities, and we're going to be presenting a check after the treasurer's remarks for a substantial amount to the Rotary Club of Raleigh Dental Clinic operated by Wake Smiles. So be sure and remain on the program following the treasurer's remarks for this special presentation. Remember, if you're shopping for any necessities during this time, if you shop on Amazon Smiles, there are proceeds that go to support our foundation, which helps us do many good works in the community. So thank you for that support. And with that, in view of time and in view of the busy schedule of our special guest, I'm going to recognize the treasurer at this time with a very brief introduction, since everyone knows him well. He's spoken to our club before. The state treasurer, Dale Folwell, operates one of the largest pension funds in the country. He's responsible for an enormous budget, and he didn't ask for these responsibilities to have to be carried out during a worldwide pandemic. in a time of many troubles and recession. And so we can only imagine this has had a huge impact on him and on his department and on the budget. And so we look forward to hearing how he's been able to handle these challenges during this time, and tell us what the outlook is for the Treasury, for the state's pension fund, and for the economy, and what he sees ahead. And hopefully he'll be able to tell us all what is the best path forward from this place. So Treasury Secretary Folwell, we welcome you and thank you very much for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Linda, and for all of you who are on the Zoom today. It's a special opportunity to present to the Raleigh Rotary Club, and as always, may get a little emotional during my remarks. Nothing political, but a lot of mathematics. So if mathematics make you nauseous, you maybe should be aware of that ahead of time. Jim had mentioned previous Treasurer Harlan Bowles. This is actually the lapel pin that Treasurer Bowles used to wear. So it's very important that as you hear these remarks that I'm reporting these numbers to you, but I'm really standing on the shoulders of all previous treasurers. My predecessor, Treasurer Moore, who many of you know as CEO and Chairman of First Bank, as well as Treasurer Bowles and Harlan, Mr. Gill. So as we proceed, I just want to break this down into three basic categories. One is the state of the state, which is going to be a lot about money and finance. Secondly, talk a little bit about where my frustrations are right now as Keeper of the Public Purse and as State Treasurer. And thirdly, to tell you a little bit about what's keeping me up at night. And then end it with some personal thoughts about the importance of Rotary International. And then if we have enough time, I'll be glad to take any question that you might have on any topic. So very briefly, talking about the state of the state financially. 6 or 7 weeks ago, we applied for, with OSBM and the Controller's Office, for the COVID CARE Act money. And we received over $4 billion of COVID CARE Act money. As soon as that money arrived at the Treasurer's Office, as you could expect, we put it into interest-bearing accounts, but $471 million of that was designated for 3 counties and 1 city. This is something that Congress wrote into the COVID law, and it was based on population. So the 3 counties, as you can imagine, were Wake, Guilford, and Mecklenburg, and the 1 city was Charlotte. So a question that I often get when I'm speaking in the Triangle area is, why didn't Raleigh get any of that COVID CARE Act money? And the reason is that it's hard to believe, but there's not 500,000 residents in the city limits of Raleigh because of all the other major incorporated areas that are in Wake County. So we don't have 3 counties, we have 100 counties, and we don't have 1 city, we have 540 cities. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a few moments. So the $4 billion arrived at the Treasurer's Office. 471 million of that went out to these 3 counties and 1 city. Wake County got $193 million of that earmarked appropriation. So that leaves $3.5 billion. And then a few weeks ago, the General Assembly passed and the governor signed a COVID CARE Act piece of legislation. So as we sit here this morning, that leaves $2 billion of the money that came in from COVID from the federal government still sitting at the Treasurer's Office. Now we're going to start stacking these. So on top of the $2 billion, we have $2 billion worth of unappropriated, unspent money from the current year's budget that ends in the next week. And the reason all these billions are important is that you've already heard that the state is expecting a shortfall of somewhere between $3 and $4 billion for the next fiscal year. On top of that $2 billion, we have $1 billion, over $1 billion sitting in the rainy day fund. And then on top of that, we still have over $3 billion sitting in the unemployment trust fund. And I know there's tremendous frustration across North Carolina about people not being able to get their unemployment benefits. But contra to when I spoke to you in the past, when I was the Assistant Secretary of Commerce, contra to that, back in 2013, every time we paid out a benefit, we were having to borrow that money from the federal government and pay interest on it. So at least it should be worth some happy bucks, Jim, to know that there's over $3 billion still remaining in the unemployment trust fund, so that once this administrative backlog gets cleared, the money is there to pay people that are entitled to that. So that's a little bit of the mathematics about where we are. As I said earlier, $2 billion still sitting in COVID CARE Act money, $2 billion unused from this year's budget, over $1 billion for the rainy day fund, and over $3 billion that's resting in the unemployment trust fund. And just to remind you, the unemployment trust fund is a captive fund. It's like an insurance company. It only gets premiums from employers across North Carolina. Occasionally, the federal or the state government will use it as a pass-through for some type of additional special benefit. But all the money that's sitting in the unemployment trust fund came from the employers of this state. And the employers of the state are the ones that defease the $2.7 billion of unemployment debt and build the surplus that we now see. So what's frustrating me? What's frustrating me is that when this COVID CARE Act money came down, it had a lot of strings attached to it. And as I've talked to Representative Price and Congresswoman Fox and Representative McHenry and other members of Congress from across North Carolina, as well as the U.S. senators, I've just sort of said in a little less snarky way, what is it in our lives today that's not COVID-19 related? How can you possibly have someone check off a box that this local government is spending this money for COVID related activities when everything that they're dealing with is COVID related? So there's way too many strings attached to this. And my big fear is that some local governments will make some uneconomical choices to start a program or purchase a piece of equipment just to check a box, when really these local counties need to be able to use this money to backfill their important responsibilities of public education, public safety, public works, and public roads. Because when you have people locked down, which means they're immobile, and when they're immobile, they can't consume, and when they can't consume, they're not generating fuel tax and sales tax and occupancy tax. And when those fees and taxes aren't generated, then it starts to affect things that you and Rotary International generally care deeply about, which is public education, public safety, public works, and public roads. So that's how all this stuff connects. And everybody talks about another piece of stimulus bill coming out of Washington. I just wish they would pass a technical corrections bill as we have in the General Assembly, that allows the freeing up of this money so that these counties can use this money to backfill a loss of revenue. You know, the three biggest expenses of a county or a city in North Carolina are the pension payment, which comes to the treasurer's office into the state retirement system, the health care for their public service workers, and interest and principal on their debt. So these are all things that have been, the ability to pay these things have been greatly affected, negatively affected, because this medical virus and it turning into an economic virus. Where are my fears? My fears are with many counties and cities across North Carolina who had just barely gotten out of, and barely, I underscore that, out of the 2008 economic downturn. And then all of a sudden they're hit with situations like we're seeing already of sales tax declines of over 30% in some of these rural communities. And what's further complicating this is that we have a lot of rural communities who have citizen-owned utilities. Take Rocky Mount, for example. If you live in the city of Rocky Mount, you're buying your natural gas, your electricity, your water and sewer, as well as your garbage pickup is all an enterprise fund within the city of Rocky Mount. So when people are not paying for their citizen-owned utilities, then it puts even more additional pressure on these counties and cities going forward. 3 or 4 weeks ago, I worked on Terrell County, and this had nothing to do with COVID, but just gives you an idea of how delicate some of these finances are across North Carolina. Now, to remind you, Terrell County is the county that you drive through to get to the Outer Banks from here. And Terrell County has a population almost equal to the number of students at Myers Park High School in Charlotte. If you just want a visual of how few people live in Terrell County, it's about equivalent to the student population at one high school in Charlotte, North Carolina. So when they have these 30, 25, and 30% declines in sales tax or occupancy tax or any kind of tax, there's no real estate, no economic development cushion to sort of prop up the finances of those communities. So that's what's keeping me up at night. Let me talk a little bit about Rotary. Charles had mentioned earlier about a situation in Wilmington where a person received a double transplant, lung transplant, and about 10 years ago, I rewrote the organ donation laws in North Carolina, and I don't know if the Raleigh Rotary Club is as fun as the Clemens Rotary Club outside of Winston-Salem, but they took this on as a project. You know, I spoke to the Ballantyne Rotary Club last week, like many other Rotaries in Rotary International. They're supporting the Haitian Water Project. And they helped me with the organ donation awareness by wrapping tractor trailers and promoting organ donation across North Carolina. When we rewrote that law, some of you might remember me telling this story, the heart on your driver's license was meaningless, which means no first responder or trauma surgeon or an ER person could rely, law enforcement, nobody could rely on that heart on your driver's license as a directive of the decedent. And as soon as we passed that law, organ transplants went up 58% the first year because of trying to make sure that something was in G-hawing with exactly what people thought it was, which means the heart on your driver's license meant you were an organ donor. I'm especially appreciative to the Rotary Club, especially the one in Greensboro. As I left Winston-Salem early this morning, one of the last things I see is a picture of our son who was killed over 20 years ago at the age of 7, and he was posthumously awarded the Paul Harris Fellow. So for all you Paul Harris Fellows out in the audience, I know the meaning of that award, and I salute you. I also want to say that, and Lawrence knows this, being back from the Winston-Salem area, you know, when I drive down to Raleigh or drive back from Raleigh at the end of the week, it never fails that I always see a billboard or digital of some kind that says Rotary International and service above self and the 4-way test. And I can't imagine where our country and our government could be these days if we had local and state and national governments who lived under the 4-way test of service above self. And as you're giving out these awards in a few minutes, a scene from a movie that some of you are very familiar with called Monuments Men. Now, Monuments Men is a true story about middle-aged gentlemen who were deputized by the President of the United States toward the end of World War II to get between the Allied forces who were going this way and the German forces who were retreating. As the German forces were retreating, Hitler had ordered all the tens of thousands of paintings and manuscripts and statues that he had captured during the previous 3 years. He had ordered all that stuff destroyed because he understood that if you can destroy destroy history, then eventually people will have no bearing. And when people have no bearings, people like him can thrive. So for those of you who haven't seen the movie, I'll just tell you about 3/4 of the way through the movie, one of the Monuments Men gets killed. And George Clooney's trying to build up their spirits. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, which I shouldn't do in any way with George Clooney, but he says, listen, one day there'll be thousands and tens of thousands of school kids and tourists and art lovers from around the world who are going to be visiting the great museums of the world and witnessing what it is that we are preserving. And they're never going to know who did it. And that's not why we're here. And that's not why the Raleigh Rotary Club is here. You're getting ready to give out a few awards in a monetary pledges in a few moments, but there's so many things that your Rotary Club does on a daily, a weekly, a monthly, and a yearly basis that no one really knows who did them. But that's not why you're here. You're here because of the 4-way test and service above self. So that's sort of a little synopsis of of what's going on at the Treasurer's Office. I've been in the news a lot lately about COVID-19, and I'll just say that many of you are aware that I'm a COVID-19 survivor. I had an intensive hospitalization for nearly 6 days. And I was one of these folks that you read about that were asymptomatic. And what that means is no loss of taste, no loss of smell, no shortness of breath, no headache, no fever, and no GI issues. None, ever. But ultimately, after I got tested, a couple of days after that, I had an x-ray taken of my chest. And my chest x-ray, for all the medical folks in the audience, was as white as this t-shirt. I mean, this dress shirt. And I asked the doctor, what are you supposed to see in an x-ray like this? And he said, well, you're supposed to see some outline of the heart and the diaphragm. The diaphragm. And so it's just an indication of how infected I was with COVID-19. We had a plan of action that was Friday. He asked me if I have an oxygen meter, and I've been racing motorcycles competitively for 45 years. Most of the time I'm on the track for over 2 hours with about 600 people who are in their 20s. So when you're that far away and you're racing motorcycles and you're my age and you're doing something that intensely for that period of time, you probably should have an oxygen meter in the truck to make sure you're okay to drive home. So I always had a finger oxygen meter with me, and he said, if your oxygen level goes down to the high 80s, you need to report to emergency room immediately. It went down to 85 on Sunday morning. My wife drove me to the emergency room. And as the Jamie Johnson song of a few years ago sings, you should have seen it in color. These spouses who just say goodbye to their loved ones in a parking lot, and they're not able to see them. I can't imagine what my wife went through during that period of time. So I was in the emergency room about 23 minutes. Very quickly after I was in the emergency room, they made a decision to prescribe to me the cocktail that you've been hearing about, hydrochloroquine and Z-Pak. And then 23 minutes later, I was in intensive care. So I'm very glad to be presenting to you today as the state treasurer and keeper of the public purse. I was alert the whole time, but I want to thank all the healthcare caregivers who squozed my hand and prayed with me during that process, and want to let you know that I can have a lot of ability to talk about flattening the healthcare curve associated with this COVID-19 crisis. But I'm also, as the keeper of the public purse, very focused on how we flatten the economic curve associated with this crisis. I think there are groups of people as well as regions of North Carolina that's going to take a very long time to ever recover from this. It just seems like in my lifetime that anytime a financial crisis like this hits, it's normally the lower income and the fixed income people that get hurt the worst. So that's where my focus is as the state treasurer. You can learn more about all this stuff at nctreasurer.com. And I'll be glad to take any questions that anybody may have. And then I want to spend another couple of minutes toward the end, Linda or Jim, when you think it's time, so that I can give you some information that may result in the Rotary Club getting even more happy bucks in. So with that, I appreciate your attention, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Yes, Richard Watkins here. Thank you so much. And most importantly, thank God you're with us. The story you shared was heartwarming. Thank you so much. Do you think there is an opportunity, or there needs to be, given this unprecedented pandemic and situation, a reimagining of the North Carolina economy? And if that is the case, what would that look like?
Well, it's a great question. I can tell you as as the state treasurer in charge of the pension plan, by the way, I don't want to lose sight of talking about this. With all the volatility in the stock market, this pension plan is even for the calendar year, and it's up over 4% for the fiscal year. So all of you who are on this call, and basically that's 1 out of 10 adult North Carolinians are connected to this state or local pension plan in some way. We remain in the check delivering business. So I'm very proud of that, and standing on the shoulders of our investment management division and all the previous treasurers that managed this plan very conservatively. Obviously, when I talk about this economic inequality a moment ago, I'm very concerned about what those economies look like going forward. I'll say this as genuinely as I can, parroting my mentor for the last 34 years, Warren Buffett, who said in his annual report a few years ago, you can't tell who's not wearing a bathing suit till the tide goes out. And what situations like this do is the tide has gone out economically. And you can see all kinds of gaps. You can see regional healthcare gaps. You can see rural healthcare gaps. You can see financial gaps. I mean, this is a very, very big situation. And you know, we just can't have a North Carolina where the torso is strong, but the legs and arms aren't. And so it's a very important question. It's one I think about. But all of my focus right now is on how we can stabilize these rural counties and cities in North Carolina. And I can tell you that they're in really tough shape. And see, there was no money appropriated except for the city of Charlotte for COVID to any cities across North Carolina. And so the counties got some of the money, but the cities didn't, and the cities are really suffering right now.
I have a question in the chat from Wilson Heyman. He says, Mr. Folwell, as a COVID-19 survivor, you have a special perspective on this pandemic. What is your response to the many North Carolinians who oppose the use of masks, social distancing, and the other precautions the experts recommend to flatten the curve?
Well, it took me a long time to realize you can't make choices for people. You can only choose how do you react to them. I carry this everywhere I go. We have a mask policy at the treasurer's office. And when people hear my story, the first question out of their mouth is, why do you wear a mask? I mean, people just want to pick lines so they can have my antibodies. They don't really care if I'm wearing a mask. But the reason is that nobody knows who has and who hasn't, and who has survived COVID-19. So I'm a believer in personal responsibility of wearing masks. But at the same time, with all the focus on the virus, the medical virus, we got to make sure we don't economically that we don't punish the healthy along the way. And I think a lot of this can be done by pushing the power down to the local communities. In so many ways, there's great governing boards at the county level and the city level that I think know their customers, their citizens better than anyone else does. So I take this everywhere I go, and my wife is currently making them. So I believe in using this and social distancing and all the other guidelines.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is all of the questions I have in the chat.
Okay.
Secretary Folwell, how long did it take you to recover, and how are you feeling now, and what was your recovery like?
Well, the thing that lingered around the most was the cough, and I got so frustrated with this 10 days after I was discharged from the hospital, and nothing worked. Nothing worked on my cough. And finally, I had a high-level doctor call me and said, Mr. Falwell, do you know how a sword swallower, I used to stutter, so that's a hard sentence. Do you know how a sword swallower stays in business? And I said, well, I think about a lot of things, but never thought about that. And the doctor said a sword swallower stays in business by training his brain not to gag, not to sneeze, and not to cough while he's performing. I said, I'm with you. How's that relate to my frustration? He said, your lungs have been training your brain for 37 days to cough because your lungs were training your brain to get everything out of your lungs that you possibly could. And he said, it's going to take a while for that to deprogram. And he was right. And so if you know anybody with COVID-19 or is recovering from COVID-19, if the cough is still lingering around, because it makes people wonder if you still have it because you're coughing. It's just that your mind, your lungs have been training your mind to cough for so long, and it takes a while for that to deprogram. As far as stamina is concerned, I was back in the office probably, and by the way, no one's in the office. So most everybody's working remotely, just a few dozen people in this large complex. But I was back in the office, and a couple weeks ago, I had 19 stops and drove 410 miles in 48 hours. So I think my stamina is back where it used to be.
That's fantastic. I have one more question for you, and I love to ask people, except when I'm in the context of litigation, to speculate. And so I'd love to have your crystal ball take, looking out 1 year. Where do you see the state's economy? Where do you see the national economy? And I know there are many, many variables in there, whether there's a second wave, how bad the flu is, of course, foreign events could, but based on, current trends that you see, what do you foresee for our state's economy and national economy over the course of the next 12 months?
Mm-hmm. Well, what I see is that as the state treasurer in North Carolina, I think we're in the best possible financial position of any state our size to pull ourselves out of this economically faster and stronger than anyone else. But it has to be done with transparency, aligning the right policies and the data to put all that together. And so that's where I see ourselves. If we can get the policy, the transparency, and the data aligned, I think that we can pull out of this stronger than anyone else. A little known fact is that, and Harlan Bowles talks about this in his book, The Keeper of the Public Purse. A little known fact is that the state treasurer sits on, is only one of 2 elected voting people on the community college board as well as the state board of education. So I think a lot of emphasis over the next few weeks is going to be spent on what school reopening looks like and how much power we're willing to push away from Raleigh to let these local communities take that. Nationally, I can tell you that 8 months ago, I had our pension portfolio stress tested because stock market was all-time high, employment was all-time high, interest rates were an all-time low, and I had it stress tested to see how this portfolio could withstand an economic shock if any of those 3 things changed. It's amazing what's changed since Valentine's Day. And this pension plan came up in the top handful as far as Pew Research, and Moody's designated us #1 in the country among our pension plan as far as our ability to withstand an economic shock. But all counties and cities and states are not in that situation. And this money that we're talking about, it's $100 billion in the pension, $12 billion in the defined contribution, $4 billion in the health plan and the pharmaceutical spend for state employees. And then we have the financial operations division. All total, we're 8 times larger than the state budget. Just the pension plan is 4 times larger than the state budget. And the pension plan is the 26th largest pool of public money in the world. Before I run out of time for our Happy Bucks, I want to remind all of you, and I always say this at the end, because if I said it at the beginning, you all be checking your devices. Go to nccash.com. Last year, we gave $600,000 to a lady who was the beneficiary of a life insurance policy that she wasn't aware of. I've never said this to a Rotary Club where somebody didn't find something at nccash.com. If you find something, there's no charge to look it up. Your maiden name, your kids' names, your parents' names, and there's no charge to retrieve it. Tithe 10% of that back to Happy Bucks, and it may be a valuable reason for you joining this meeting today. We also have other things. If you are missing things from lock boxes, we have baby teeth, silver teeth, gold teeth, and false teeth. Because you bankers on the call know that every time somebody doesn't pay their bill on their lock box, it gets drilled out and the contents get sent to the treasurer's office. We just returned some World War II medals recently to a person that didn't know what happened to them. So
Wow.
I really appreciate it. I hope this has been a valuable, some valuable information, and I look forward to joining you in person again someday.
Treasurer Folwell, we want to thank you so much for being with us today. It was a fascinating talk. You were the cleanup hitter for us for our Rotary year, and it was a great finish to the year. And we just thank you so much. Fascinating talk, and I wasn't expecting the sort of a bonus of hearing about COVID, although I'm very sorry you suffered from it. But it was really an interesting story and a reminder to all of us that, you know, any of us is subject to contracting this virus if we don't really take great care, and even then there's a risk. You've got a lot on your plate dealing with one of the largest pension funds in the world and dealing with an enormous budget in this very challenging time. And you're going to need some help in doing that. So our executive secretary is going to send you the coveted Rotary coffee mug. And you can use this for a cup of Java in the morning and look at the four-way test whenever you like. And hopefully that'll be of some help to you and remind you of this occasion where you joined us today. So thank you again.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Ethics laws won't allow me to accept that. And most of the time when I'm there with you in person, I accept it. Then I tell somebody afterwards, but that's not possible with a Zoom call. So I appreciate the notion, and thank you for everything that you do, all the advocacy you do on behalf of the invisible and where people don't know what's happening, but that's not why you're here.
Thank you so much. Linda will find someone needy of a coffee mug in the neighborhood, and we'll take care of it that way. We know you have another meeting to attend, and I don't want to make you late for that. So thank you so much. And I'll just ask everyone else to stay around for a few minutes. We've got some additional programming. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great job.
That was just so interesting. And Treasurer Falwell mentioned the Happy Dollars. There is the opportunity to contribute to our fight against dementia and Alzheimer's by contributing to the Cart Bucket, contributing Happy Dollars. Just send a message to Linda, and she'll include the amount that you want to contribute onto your invoice. And speaking of invoices, the end of our fiscal year is June 30. And we still have some members who've not yet paid their dues. Kind of reminds me of attorneys that file their pleading or their brief just before the deadline. So don't be like those guys. Go ahead and send in your dues payment this week if you haven't done it already, so we can relieve the headache that Treasurer Tom Packer is beginning to have as he's trying to wrap up our fiscal year. That is June 30. So thank you very much for taking care of that. So our program next week is going to be the installation of the new officers. Eric Stevens will be inducted as our president. I'm very excited about that because he is ready to lead day one. He's been a fantastic president-elect. He's been involved in everything that's gone on this year and the year before, and he is superbly well prepared and capable and is going to do just a fantastic job as president of this club. So that will be next Monday, so please tune in for that, and we might have some special entertainment for that event as well. So now I'd like to call on Christy for the membership report.
Hey everyone, super short report today, but just want to remind you that we have our virtual social coming up this Thursday, the 25th at 5:30. So Linda sent an invitation out. yesterday. We'll resend that on Wednesday as well, but they've been really fun the last few times we've had them. Great opportunity. Just get together, 5:30 Zoom call, have a beverage of your choice, and get to just chat about everything else in life that's non-work and non-Rotary related, and just catch up in a social manner. So I hope y'all can attend. Look out for that invitation in your inbox. And that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Christy. And if you've not yet joined one of these Rotary socials, they really are fun. Everybody's having their beverage of choice, whether it's iced tea or an alcohol-free beer or a glass of wine or some ancient scotch. You'll learn all the series and movies and books that you want to catch up on during this time. So please join there. If Mark Hackett is on, I might ask Mark to say a word or two about the Southeast Raleigh Club.
I don't see Mark on, Jim.
Okay, so I was on the last meeting, and I'll just report that we ordered a Rotary bell in honor of the Southeast Raleigh Club, and it was presented to the club. They were very excited about it. Their president, Mia Davis, rang it out at the end, and they were very excited about the inscription on it, commemorating the founding of their club. And they're up to about 19, 20 members. They're having fantastic speakers, and they're fired up about service, and they're fired up about growing. So one of the great things that we've been able to accomplish this year as a club is to found this new club in Southeast Raleigh that's going to grow and really be dynamic and really render a lot of service in our community. All right, so we also, I wanted to announce a few birthdays. Mike Toddy is today. So happy birthday, Mike. Frank McNally, his birthday is the 28th. And then Ron and Martha Garber's anniversary is the 28th also. And let's see, then we also had Sylvia Hackett was the 16th. Corey Fuse was the 17th. Sam McNary's birthday was the 19th. Bert Nowles was the 20th. And I wanted to mention those because we didn't address those at our last meeting. And so now, if Eric Larson is on, I'd like to recognize Eric Larson for a special presentation. And if Eric, I saw at one point Eric had to leave the meeting. If Eric had to leave, I'll take the presentation. There's Eric.
Yeah.
Great.
All right, Jim. I missed a couple of things there with internet problems, but you're referring to our Rotary Club of Raleigh Dental Clinic presentation,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, thank you.
So Bill McClure and I saw on this call earlier had a vision several years ago of partnering with a group called Wake Smiles to put together a dental clinic for folks that couldn't afford dental work. And through the time of startup and establishment and now the ongoing activities with the Rotary Club of Raleigh Dental Clinic operated by Wake Smiles, that's a mouthful to say each time, we are pleased to have a continuing support of that. We've actually voted as your board of directors to have ongoing support from the Rotary Club of Raleigh Foundation for the dental clinic. And this year is no different. And I believe Summer is here to represent the clinic. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, so we have prepared a check. I do not know if it's been presented yet, but we are happy to continue our presentation or our support of the Rotary Club of Raleigh Dental Clinic operated by Wake Smiles. And so we are grateful for the work you're doing in our community. Summer has the check there. And I'll turn it over to Summer for a couple of comments. Please go ahead, Summer.
Thank you all so much for this beautiful donation, and please know that it is going to help a lot of people. The treasurer mentioned how the lower economic, the people living in the lower economic status in our community suffer the most, And it's absolutely true with dental. And those are the people we are serving. During this COVID time, you can imagine that a virus that's spread by aerosols is particularly dangerous in a dental setting. So we have a lot of interesting challenges ahead of us. We ended clinics March 13th. And since then, we've actually been doing teledentistry and triaging patients in pain, and then partnering with community dentists to see them at no charge. So that's gone really, really well. And another cool thing, we just started treatment again last Monday, and we're just seeing urgent care and getting people out of pain so they're not visiting the ED. And we have a task force that meets very regularly, and we'll go forward when it's safe to do so. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Summer. The dental clinic is really exceeding expectations. They're treating more patients, more visits, providing help to people that allows them to have self-confidence to interview for jobs and obtain jobs. And even during this downturn, they're doing teledentistry and still providing service. So it's a fantastic thing, and it's great that our club, through its foundation, is able to provide this level of support. But Summer and her people are doing a fantastic job. When we're able to, we're going to have a visit to the clinic and a social event there and a service event there. So we're looking forward to that once we're able to get out. I think that that covers our program for today, unless anyone has something to bring before this meeting.
Jim, there was a question. People were just wondering what the amount was for the check to the dental clinic.
It was $3,156.
Thank you.
So congratulations to our club and its foundation for being able to provide that level of support. And just in closing, our club has done a fantastic job this year of service, despite being shut down and everyone being sheltering in place or having limited opportunity to get out. We're supporting charities. People are doing great work in their neighborhoods. They're helping elderly shut-in neighbors. They're helping in their places of worship. They're donating to charities. And I would just encourage everyone to continue to do that great work. To donate to our club's foundation, to the Rotary International Foundation, which is providing clean water, sanitation, fighting disease and poverty all over the world. And thank you for all that you do in that regard to our members. I thank you. So now we're going to adjourn, as we always do. We're going to say in unison the four-way test. So if you'll all join me in the four-way test. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
R-O-T-A-R-Y. That spells Rotary. Very good.
Yay!
All right, Rotarians,
Thank you.
we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good job, Jim.
Everyone have a great week.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.